and just don't see how a Christian person, called himself somebody that knows God, can vote for Obama, knowing that 50 million babies been killed in America.
All righty, Jones, but just a reminder, folks, 30 days, they ask you to honor our 30-day policy. Let's take a look at the campaign trail where the candidates are going to be today and tomorrow as they head back out on the campaign trail. 15 days to go. Senator Obama today in Tampa Bay and in Orlando, Florida. And then he'll be in Palm Beach County and Miami on Tuesday. Senator McCain today is in St. Charles and Belton, Missouri. And then Bensalem, Harrisburg, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on Tuesday. Running mate Joe Biden is in Seattle, Washington today, and Governor Sarah Palin, Colorado Springs, Loveland, and Grand Junction, Colorado today, Reno, and Henderson, Nevada on Tuesday. So busy schedules for all four. Last call here, Newark, New Jersey, supporting Senator Obama. What'd you think of the endorsement?
Yeah, good morning, America. I'm calling as a supporter of Do the Right Thing candidate, Obama. My point of calling this morning is listening to all the negativity geared towards four-star General Colin Powell, a man who happens to be a man of color who served two white presidents, who had served this country, who had served and almost died in wars, okay? So America, if you think you're smarter than Colin Powell, I don't think you are. I think the man has credibility that extends beyond one's color. It extends beyond one's attitude towards one's of color. Ask John McCain what he thinks of Colin Powell.
All righty, New Jersey, thanks for your call. More coming up. In just a moment, we're going to meet Representative Gwen Moore. She sits on the House Budget Committee, and she'll attend today's hearing with Ben Bernanke. That is live this morning, by the way, here on C-SPAN at 10. We'll be right back.
Follow C-SPAN's Campaign 2008 coverage as the presidential candidates head toward Election Day. Watch debates from key House, Senate, and governor's contests from around the country. And online at cspan.org/politics. Get the latest Reuters, C-SPAN, and Zogby presidential tracking poll. See the newest campaign ads. Go back and watch the presidential and vice presidential debates at our Debate Hub. C-SPAN, for a continuing look at the candidates and races nationwide, right up to Election Day.
C-SPAN, created in 1979 by the cable television industry. But with no commercials, how is C-SPAN funded?
I guess privately funded.
I assume they raise their own money.
No, I have absolutely no idea.
Private donations. Federal government.
By the cable companies. I mean, that's my impression, but I'm not sure if I'm right.
That's right. For nearly 30 years, America's cable companies have been providing C-SPAN programming to you commercial-free as a public service.
Washington Journal continues.
Representative Gwen Moore of Wisconsin sits on the House Budget Committee. You're going to hear from Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke this morning. What's the purpose of this hearing?
Absolutely. I think that the committee needs to know that we're moving in the right direction, that the potentially $700 billion that we have committed in tranches or in stages is going to be well spent. And I think that Mr. Bernanke is going to try to reassure us of that. I think he's also going to try to reassure us that the monies that we're using are going to be targeted toward those troubled assets where we can get an equity position in banks and to increase the potential for recovering the investments. I think he also wants to admit that we're in a recession and to reassure us that there's a way out of this.
You've been back to Wisconsin, obviously, over the recess. What are you hearing from your constituents? What would they like to know of the Fed chairman?
Well, I can tell you that I think it's appropriate for him to speak to us because people are furious that we're in this predicament, obviously. They feel that they need a bailout as well. And I think that another part of our hearing, we're going to hear from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, where they talk about a need for a stimulus package. And that's part of the hearing as well. I don't think Mr. Bernanke is necessarily going to speak to that. He's going to talk about what the Fed is doing in concert with other central banks around the world. But I know my constituents are going to be particularly interested in that part of the recovery.
Back to the stimulus for a second. CQ Weekly out today has an article about the proposed stimulus plan. Their headline is "A Concrete Stimulus Plan Can Infrastructure Projects Put Recovery in the Fast Lane?" Do you feel that's an important part of this, is to have a major second economic stimulus?
Absolutely, because when we hear from folk like Bernanke, what we hear is that there's a lack of confidence, that there's problems in the credit market, and part of that lack of confidence is consumer spending. We're going to have a terrible retail year for Christmas, and so a stimulus is extremely important for getting people to spending again, getting them to invest again, getting employers to feel confident to add new jobs. We've lost almost 1 million jobs since last December.
On the spending part, wasn't part of the credit problem, though, actually part of overspending, overusing our credit as consumers?
Credit, not actually spending those things that are really necessary. For example, a part of our stimulus package would include food stamps. Food stamps is a huge hit to recovery in the economy, because people actually use those resources right away. Food costs have gone up tremendously. Another part of that would be an extension of unemployment compensation benefits. And obviously, people who are on unemployment compensation will be using it directly to pay their bills and perhaps pay down some credit debt that they have. Yes, our problem has been that we have had too much credit, but not that we have not supported retail activity.
Let's invite our C-SPAN viewers to join us and ask questions of Representative Moore. She'll be with us up until 8 o'clock Eastern. 202-737-0001 for Republicans, 202-737-0002 for Democrats, Independents, and all others, 202-628-0205. We have a Wisconsin call standing by. Lake Geneva, good morning on our Republican line.
Yes, just to get back, step back for a moment, back to your last segment there. I was going to say there was 4 past secretaries of state that endorsed McCain yesterday too. So I guess you forgot about that. But Miss Moore, your son is a federal criminal, right? He slashed vehicles on tires on vehicles in the last presidential election. Is that true?
No, it's not.
It is true.
Lake Geneva, do you have another point about the conversation topic this morning?
Yeah, I wish you'd quit being a sycophant for Obama and talk about the other candidates too.
Well, that caller mentioned Senator Obama and the endorsement by Colin Powell yesterday. What did you think?
Well, I can tell you that General Powell is certainly a credible figure in American politics. He clearly did not endorse Obama without thinking long and hard about it. And I think that the events of the last couple of months really swayed him to come out. I don't think that he liked the tone of the campaign, and I think he really believes that Obama is a transformational candidate.
Democrat next on our Democrats line, Toledo. Good morning, Ohio.
Good morning. I would like to ask the question of the impact of the problem with the new bailout packages, if you will, to the primary budget concerns of Medicare and Medicaid, and whether nationalized health care or McCain's program will impact the budget in a negative fashion, and how they will deal with Medicare and Medicaid. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's an extremely important question, I think, Bill, the caller has raised. I mean, part of the stimulus package is to provide an overmatch for Medicaid funds. We've seen, again, a tremendous job loss throughout this recession, almost 1 million jobs just since last December, and it will be even greater by the end of this year. And one of the first hits that states take is an increased expenditure for Medicaid. And so that's a direct, we've got practically every state in this union with deficits in their budget. And unlike the federal budget, they in fact have to close those gaps and present a balanced budget. And so the stimulus would certainly help states in that respect, in that regard.
You're from Wisconsin's 4th District. Where is that? And tell us in a snapshot what the economy's like now.
I'm from Wisconsin. I represent primarily the city of Milwaukee, St. Francis, Cudahy, West Dallas. This is a blue-collar, proud working class community. We've experienced a loss of revenue about 5% in the last year. And of course, we belong to a part of the country that has seen a great attrition of manufacturing jobs, as is the case in Ohio. So we're struggling, and we've seen this attrition of jobs as well. So a stimulus package would certainly improve our condition. Another part of the stimulus package would include infrastructure redevelopment. When you look at the bridge that collapsed in Minneapolis, you'll realize that there are probably at least 8,000 bridges in bad condition or terrible condition, such as that one was. So this stimulus package is certainly an important add-on to the bailout, as it's called, for the financial industry.
Let's hear from Wisconsin, an independent caller from Lancaster. Go ahead.
Yes. I was trying to purchase a house 7 or 8 years ago, and there was no down payment necessary. And I was wondering if we were ever going to come to the point where we were going to demand a down payment, like there used to be a 10% or a 20% down payment for a house.
I think the caller is raising a really important point, that you sort of have to have some skin in the game in order to be able to make appropriate financial decisions. You know, I think a lot of the programs that were targeted toward getting worthy, modest income buyers into the market were well-intentioned. I think that we have seen, because of the unregulated nature of some of the players, non-banking institutions, we've seen, and non-licensed players, like some of the mortgage brokers, we have seen a lot of unsavory practices, and people were put into homes that they really could not afford.
You're on the House Budget Committee, and so what does Representative Bernanke fall under the purview of the Budget Committee's oversight?
Well, he also falls under the purview of the Financial Services oversight. I'm also on the Financial Services Committee, so I suspect that I'll hear from him again. I think that the Budget Committee has oversight over the total budget, and so I think it's extremely important for the Budget Committee to know what the starting point is. I mean, the Budget Committee deals with the impact of budget recommendations vis-a-vis the deficits that we're experiencing, and I think it's extremely important. What I'll be expecting is for Mr. Bernanke to be sort of straightforward with us. I don't need a pep rally from him about the fundamentals of the economy being great. I think that in his role he is troubled by the prospect of admitting that we're in a recession or admitting how bad it is. But I think that we could only wish that the only problem that we had was in the mortgage market. Some of these other credit products that we've seen are very troubling, and I'll be asking him about what impact that'll have over our overall outlook for economic growth.
Speaking of mortgages, the Chicago Tribune, not your hometown paper, but nearby, reports about foreclosures in Cook County up 47.8% in the first half of this year, expected to pass 42,000 by the end of the year. What's the housing situation in Milwaukee in terms of the mortgages and foreclosures, things like that?
Yeah, we've seen some foreclosures in Milwaukee. I think that there was a lot we weren't at risk as some of the communities that were targeted for subprime loans, but we have experienced a foreclosure problem in Milwaukee. I think that we're trying to stay on top of it with our Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, with all of the powers that we have in our state. Our city is very proactive in trying to stave off some of these foreclosures. But we certainly are not in as bad a condition as some of the other states are.
Out to Oregon next. LeGrand, good morning on our Republicans line. Hi.
Good morning. I got a question. What I'm kind of curious is it possible that Colin Powell is backing Obama also on the fact that Bush used Colin Powell as a tool to get into the war and that he's feeling kind of betrayed by his party in that issue? Because Colin Powell's a great person. I would have loved for him to have run for president, and I'd vote for him in a minute. I don't see that Colin Powell is necessarily backing Obama on all the right issues.
Congresswoman?
Well, I think that Colin Powell says that he remains a Republican, and I think that he has really come to his decision the same way a lot of us have. That we've just sort of looked at the four candidates when you consider the presidency and the vice presidency and how it affects us personally. I think that Colin Powell, being a Republican, probably was a little bit more difficult than people who are just voting for members of their party. But I do think that he claims that he has watched Barack Obama be steady. He's watched McCain be rather erratic. He thinks that given the times, that Barack Obama would be the best choice.
And just further adding to the endorsement yesterday, the Associated Press reports this morning Senator Obama on the Today Show. The NBC Today Show said, quote, that Colin Powell will have a role as one of my advisors, end quote. Whether Powell wants to take a formal role, Obama said, would be something we have to discuss. Louisville, Kentucky, independent for Representative Gwen Moore. Good morning.
Good morning. First off, the caller earlier who attacked the good lady, it was despicable and it's uncalled for. But now to the meat and potatoes of what I've called about. First off, Colin Powell has no credibility as far as I'm concerned, and it's a little bit of ironic that an anti-war president or wannabe president, Barack Obama, would now say that he has a possible play in his administration. But the call is about, it's not $700 billion, it's $840 billion was the total cost of the bailout. And could the good lady speak about the extra $140 billion that was tacked on and where the money goes? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that. The other $140 billion, and just sort of let me recall, the other $140 billion was for sweeteners, as they call it. One of the things was mental health parity, which I think on its own merit should have been passed. Another part of that $140 billion was for the AMT. It's the alternative minimum tax, which affects about, I'm thinking about 40 million Americans. The alternative minimum tax was originally designed to prevent millionaires from receiving tax breaks because they could reduce their obligation by so many deductions, and the alternative minimum tax was meant to give them some tax. Well, because this hasn't been indexed for inflation, so many ordinary Americans, firefighters, teachers, nurses, have fallen into this. So this $140 million will give tax relief to Americans who make $150,000, $160,000 a year.
That's just
not rich people.
Short-term fix for that, though. That's not.
It's a short-term fix, but it passed because it didn't need offsets, other budget cuts, in order to pass. So it's not like it's just sort of thrown away. Probably, caller, the AMT fix will help you.
Let's go to Emerson, New Jersey, a Democrat calling this morning. Hi.
Hi. Yes, thank you so much. Hello?
You're on the air.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for taking my call. I have a question. We are regulating now pretty much, or we want to, pretty much everything in this country. I want to know if we can regulate health care. My husband, who has a very small business, pays between $13,000 and $15,000 a year for a family of four. And every single time, every year, the health care goes up. So we have to change our health insurance. If we were to get a traditional plan, for example, with Blue Cross Blue Shield, it would cost $25,000 a year for a family of four. Is there any way that they can regulate health care? It seems to me that it just seems to be spiking every single year. I just don't understand why someone can't get a handle on the cost of having a plan.
Let's hear from a response from Representative Moore, New Jersey.
Well, yeah, thanks for raising that. I mean, that's the number one issue that's on voters' minds during this campaign season. I can tell you that Senator Obama has laid out a health plan which will, in fact, go right to the heart of lowering premiums for folk who are already insured and for providing an affordable premium for those 47 million Americans who don't have insurance. His plan would be directly targeted at helping you. I don't know exactly what the health background of you and your family is, but one of the things that Senator Obama wants to do is to sort of take the catastrophic health care coverage out of the hands, off the backs of businesses so that it could lower the cost of those premiums to those companies and obviously lower the cost of those co-payments to folk like the lady from New Jersey. So I think that getting control of our healthcare costs is an integral part of solving our economic woes.
Back to the budget for a sec. Front page of the New York Times this morning, they have an article about the deficit. Deficit rises and consensus is to let it grow. Just a bit from that article, the bank bailout in the latest big outlay could cost $250 billion in just the next few weeks, and a newly proposed stimulus package would have $150 billion or more flowing from Washington before the next president takes office in January. Adding to the damage is that tax revenues fall as the economy weakens. This is likely just as the government needs hundreds of billions of dollars to repair the financial system. The nation's wars are growing more costly as fighting spreads in Afghanistan, and a declining economy swells outlays for unemployment insurance, food stamps, and other federal aid. But the extra spending, a sore point in normal times, has been widely accepted on both sides of the political aisle as necessary to salvage the banking system and avert another Great Depression. Quote, right now would not be the right time to balance the budget. This is Maya McGinnis, who is president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, a bipartisan Washington group that normally pushes the opposite message. Is there a danger with letting the deficit grow, letting the national debt grow?
Well, I can tell you, you can get a hold of deficits fairly quickly with a strategic plan. But I do agree with the writer of this article that you can't watch unemployment rise to maybe 8-9%, where there are projections that it may get there. You can't watch food prices go up, watch 40 million Americans fall into the alternative minimum tax, see companies reduce jobs, see states fall into deficits and decide that you're going to balance the budget. I think that even though the pressure of the debt service will be on us and we will eventually have to pay the piper, I think that you have to let these deficits run their course. That was part of the huge argument over whether or not to put that $140 million in the rescue package.
On top of the $700 billion.
On top of the $700 billion and not have it paid for because we needed to provide relief without regard to the added deficit.
Let's go to Springfield, Massachusetts. Good morning on our Republicans line. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, and I'd like to say thank you to C-SPAN, and I'm glad that you came on, Representative Moore.
Thank you.
Question to you is, I think we'll have an opportunity now with Chairman Bernanke there, the prophetic words of Nathan Rothschild, who said, "Give me control of the money, and I care not who makes the law." I hope not. That is not the case. But my point, what I'm trying to get to, is we had the situation with Boesky and Milken, and junk bonds is what it was redefined as. Now we're in this, and the problem becomes redefined as toxic assets. When, and now we've taken the malefactors and given them more money as if that is going to make them more trustworthy in terms of straightening out the loan crisis. My question is, what can be done to get prosecution of those who have participated in fraud under the existing laws that we now have?
That's a great question, caller, and it's a real high priority for me. I think that part of moral hazard that we try to avoid is to continue to create an environment where people can make millions of dollars and there are no consequences. Part of the reason that we're in this credit crisis, the economic crisis right now, is because CEOs and companies, investors were allowed to take these huge risks, and if they won big, and if they lost, there were no consequences. Matter of fact, they could even get a bailout for driving the company into the ground. So I think that, and as a member of Congress, I think it's important to be honest that we've got to do our due diligence and police the financial markets. I have, ever since I've been elected, I've only been on board since 2005, but a great deal of the time that I've spent on the Financial Services Committee has been to look at the regulatory framework and the weaknesses. And so I think the caller makes an extremely important point. We shouldn't just give them the money and let them do whatever they will with it. We should be policing it fervently.
Let's go to Baltimore next on our Independence line. Good morning. Hi.
Good morning. I have a question. A lot of Americans, when we lose jobs or when jobs get shipped overseas or when wages get stagnant, we always get pointed to capitalism as that thing that rules our market. But with this bailout, it seems uncapitalistic to me because now we have financial sectors and businesses that are getting essentially high-profile welfare from the government, and we have to pay for it. It doesn't make sense. And a lot of times we hear people say, well, the American people quite don't understand it. Well, we do understand it, and in our ears it sounds wrong, and we're just wondering why, if the majority of the people are against this, how can our representatives vote this bill through? When I first heard of it and they were trying to get this bailout passed through, my ears went up because they were trying to do it so quickly, and then also they were trying to do it without any oversight. And that just threw up my alarms. I'm just wondering why, if you're getting so much pushback from the American people, why would we pass this thing that seems to me uncapitalistic?
Okay, Baltimore.
You make an excellent point. I mean, when I first heard about the bailout, I said absolutely no way would I support this. The reality is, Baltimore, I mean, this is part of what makes it so egregious and so enraging, that the activities on Wall Street actually do have an impact on you right there in Baltimore. I don't know what you do for a living, but just say, for example, you're an hourly wage worker. The ability for your company to access money for payroll could be limited. There could be, you could lose your job. There could be reductions of shifts. If you work at a grocery store, have a small business, the ability to get goods and services on credit could be limited. You could find, that there's no inventory in inner city or South Baltimore. And this is why many representatives, including me, voted for it, because there's no one who's going to suffer more than small businesses, low-income people, poor people, minorities, because of the meltdown on Wall Street. No one is going to suffer more in terms of job losses, in terms of lack of access to goods and services, and that's what makes it so outrageous.
Fed Chairman Bernanke last week in a speech said that the recovery is not going to happen right away. Exactly. A speech that at the